So the present value of a future cash flow is the value of that cash flow in today's dollars. Now, I'll tell you this, but we'll get to a little bit more mathematics to show you how I arrived at this answer in a second. But I can show you that $110,000 in 1 year is worth the same to me as $100,000 that I received today is if the interest rate is 10%. The money that we receive further in the future is worth less today, right? So that's an example of the time value of money. So maybe that doesn't make sense quite yet, but we need to have our 3 rules for time travel. So here's our 3 rules. Only values at the same point in time can be compared or combined. So if I have the promise of $20,000 in the future, that is not worth $20,000 to me because I can't receive it yet, right? I need to know what it's worth to me today. So to move a cash flow forward in time, we have to compound it. So I can use my little formula here to figure out what the future value of those cash flows is. This looks complicated, but it really is not. So future value of a cash flow, FV, is equal to C, which is the initial amount of money that I have. And then I'm just multiplying that by 1 plus R, where R is the interest rate raised to the T power, where T is the number of time periods into the future that I'll be growing my money. So this is the saving example. Now to move a cash flow backwards in time, we have to discount it. And this is essentially very similar to the previous equation, right? The present value is equal to the amount it's going to be worth in the future, C, divided by 1 plus R raised to the T. Looks exactly the same, right? Instead of multiplying now, we're just dividing. So before we move on to our next little question here, are there any questions so far?
And we put our logo as grow. And this is one thing that I think is really important. Questions help you grow. So if there's anything that's unclear, please just ask us a question. And this is the first of these that we're doing. And so if, your questions will be super helpful to us as we develop these for the next one.
Yeah, and if I can add, students, this content, when you're thinking about your oral presentations, you remember, or maybe if you're a new student, this is new to you, you get questions from the judges. And a lot of those questions will be asking you, how will this be profitable in 10, 15, 20 years? So using those formulas, maybe you don't have to calculate exactly on the spot in your head, but having an idea of those relationships can really help you further your cause or your plan for environmental management.
I like the little time travel thing. So if you can remember time travel, say, oh yeah, Dr. Torrell told me about time travel.
You can quote him in your presentations as well. Just saying.
Oh, I'm very quotable. So here's my next question for you. Would you rather take $100,000 today or $110,000 in a year? Now this one gets a little tricky. So you're going to have 3 options this time. $100,000 today, because I want the money today. $110,000 in a year, because it's more money. Or it depends. Okay. Now these are some pretty interesting results. Kind of a neat split here in some sense. So here is my answer. Although, there are certain circumstances where this could be different, but it depends. That would be my answer. And it depends on the interest rate. So for example, if the interest rate was 5%, it would be better to take the $110,000 in a year because $100,000 will not grow to $110,000 even after the interest. So I was actually telling a colleague this story about my dad this morning. And so my dad, he was also an economist, and he was going to graduate school in the 1970s. And during that time period, the interest rates were very high for uh, for funds. And what he realized was that he could take out a student loan at the subsidized rate, so the interest that he would have to pay back wasn't very much, but the interest that he could get from a savings account was more than the amount that he would have to pay back. So he just took a huge loan, as much as he could, put it in the bank, didn't touch it, and then just paid it all back the minute he got out of school. So I would not recommend that strategy to our students who are thinking about college in the near future, because that won't work anymore, but it certainly did in the 1970s. So let's quickly have a little concept check. True or false? The further in time we receive money, the less it is worth to us today. And it looks like nothing's moving here. So it looks like everybody got it. That the further in time this moves, the less it's worth to you now. Let's visualize the time value of money. So $110,000 to be received in 1 year. We've already shown that that's worth $100,000 to us if the interest rate is 10%. So we're going to stick with 10% because the math is easy, right? So we've demonstrated that one. But what if we move to 10 years? If I'm going to receive $110,000 in 10 years, that promise is only worth $42,000 to me. The other way of saying this is that if interest rates remained 10% over the entire 10-year period, I could put $42,000 in the bank and it would grow to $110,000. That's the two different ways of thinking about it. Now look at this. If you promise me that in 500 years, or 50 years, sorry, 50 years, that I would get $110,000, that's only worth less than $1,000 to me. That is kind of hard to wrap your head around the first time that you see that, right? But it's the same concept. If I can save for 50 years, if I put about $1,000 down, that and the interest rate remains 10% over that 50 years, then I would have $110,000 at the end of 50 years. This is also my pitch to young students. Even if you're a poor college student, open up a savings account or some retirement account and put money in it. It doesn't have to be much. You just have to force yourself to not touch it. That will make you so much better off because, you know, if you put $1,000 in, by the time you're ready for retirement, that turns into 110. That's a pretty good deal, right?